guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Sadaf and I love all things home decor and DIY. Today I'm going to be sharing 3 DIYs with you, and one of them is a pumpkin. I know pumpkin season is over, but I made it recently and I somehow forgot to post it. But it's actually such a cute pumpkin. I thought it was too good not to post it. So let's get into it. So for the first DIY, which is the pumpkin, I started with some wire. I chose a wire that was thick enough and just sturdy enough to keep its shape and be a nice base for my pumpkin. Basically, I then started wrapping the wire around the jar, a glass jar, it doesn't matter what you use. And as you can see, it was kind of hard and challenging to do so because the wire was thick and firm. But I just kept on doing, and I wrapped it around the jar 7 times. You could do other numbers, but it's important that it's an odd number. Then I started just shaping the wires. I'm holding one side of the rings, let's say, in my hand and separating the other side of the rings. And you can kind of see it kind of starts to look like a pumpkin. I don't know, a wire pumpkin. And then I used some yarn to just tie the inside parts, inside section. This is temporary. We're gonna remove the yarn later on. I then just used some hot glue and attached my raffia to my wire and just started wrapping. When I reached that end part, where you cut the wire, I just covered it with a ton of glue and raffia to kind of just make it disappear and attach the pieces of the wire to each other. It wasn't perfect, but at the end it wasn't really visible. I then started wrapping the middle section. You can just remove the yarn and just use the raffia to cover the whole thing. I just tried to cover as much of the wires as I possibly could and just used some hot glue and finished it off. And then for the weaving part, I grabbed a long piece of raffia and just tied a knot and just attached it to one of the rings. Then I brought the raffia from underneath the next ring to over the next ring and then wrapped it around the same ring. Then I moved under the next ring, over the next one, and wrap it around the same ring, and then move on to the next one. Again, under one, over one, wrap it around the one you went over, and then go underneath the next ring. At first, the weaving looks almost plain and doesn't really show the pattern, but as you weave more, as you can see here, the pattern starts to show, and you get this almost like a triangle like effect. And as you can see, I'm just repeating the same thing, going under one ring and then going over the next ring. Here I kind of get confused, and then just going under the next one. And whenever you run out of your raffia, you want it to be where you go under the ring, so it's not really visible and showing. And just tie the next piece of raffia and just keep on weaving. When you get to the middle section, like these parts, the pattern kind of starts to look plain again and you lose that effect. But I just kept on going. When I reached the bottom, the raffia kind of just moved around a lot, so the weaving ended up looking a bit not neat, you could say, just random. I had some open spaces. but I just did what I had to do. I can't really see the bottom, so I didn't care. And then I just used some raffia, as you can see, and just gave it a little bit of a detail. And then I used a piece of cork and just glued it on top of the pumpkin to create the stem, and my pumpkin looked super adorable, I would say. For the second DIY, we're jumping right into it. I had some corn husk and a metal frame. My corn husk was dry, so I let it soak in some water for a few minutes. Then cut a small piece of the husk. You want to cut it lengthwise so you have thin pieces. And just as you can see, I started wrapping it around the metal frame. And at first I just wrapped it on top of itself so it would stay in place, and then just started wrapping on top of the metal frame. Whenever I ran out of my husk, I would just add the next piece kind of in between the frame and the previous one, and just started wrapping them together. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but basically you want your new piece of husk to kind of just cover the previous one. And I should mention, when you go cut the husks, there's a firm piece at the top that I used the scissor to remove, and I forgot to film it. You want to cut that part as well. When I finished one side of my frame, I just kept on weaving and, well, not weaving, covering the frame, and going to the other side. You want to cover the top side and the bottom side of the frame, and that's all you need, but I ended up covering the whole thing, like the sides, the top, the bottom. When I was done with the whole thing, I just tied a knot, and then I moved to the weaving part. For the weaving part, you want more husk, but this time I'm using the whole thing and not splitting it. And as you can see, I put it around my frame and just started wrapping the two sides of the husk around each other. You want one side to be shorter than the other. You can just add a new piece. I'm just putting it inside the previous husk, kind of, and wrapping them around each other a couple of times so they're almost attached to each other. They're not like super attached, but then I'm using the other piece of the husk, other side of my husk, and wrapping it on top of the other one to kind of just cover the seam. I'm doing the same thing for the other side, adding the new husk here, just wrapping them with each other, around each other, I don't know, and then using the other side, other piece, and wrapping it on top of the new one. And I just made sure to cover the seam part so my weaving was clean. It's not gonna be perfect, the seam is gonna show here and there, but I tried to make it as clean as possible. As you can see, I reached the middle section, the middle piece of the frame, so I just put one piece of my corn husks underneath and one over, and then I just continued weaving as I did previously. You can see my corns were the same size. I just cut one side of it short. I wouldn't have to add the new piece at the same time to both sides, because that doesn't work and you can't really cover the seams. And this is how the weaving is going to look like. As you can see, all the corner pieces are covered with the weaving itself, and that's why I told you in the beginning that you don't really have to wrap the corner pieces with corn, and they're just going to be covered with the weaving itself. And when I was done, I just as you can see, brought the corn to the inside of the frame, tied the knot with both pieces, and just started weaving with the extra pieces, like going over and under the previous rows. Then I just let my basket dry completely and used some stain to give it some color. It naturally has this greenish creamy color, but I wanted it to look more brown and similar to wood color. Then I just used a thin MDF piece for the bottom, cut all the extra pieces, and my basket was complete. For the third project, I grabbed some air dry clay. And here you can see I'm just making it flat using a spray paint because I didn't have anything else to use. Then I used a bowl to cut a round piece, a circular piece. You want your clay to be about 1/2 centimeter. If it's too thick, then it's gonna take a long time for it to dry. Then I used some water and just started making the edges look more smooth and make it look nicer. But actually I think the problem was that my clay was too dry, and you'll see later on that it cracked a little bit. But if you use a better quality clay, I'm sure it's gonna look nicer. I then used another piece of the clay and just made a long snake-like shape. I added some PVA glue in a circular shape in the middle of our base piece, and just started gluing the clay on top of that round piece. And I think I forgot to mention, I wanted to make a candle holder. Just added more glue and just started creating the shape. What I should have done here was I should have just used a candle to make sure that opening was, the right size for my candle, but I forgot to do that. It did end up working in the end, but I had to use a smaller candle. Then I used the bowl to, give it a bowl shape basically, and then I just let it dry. Here's the candle holder dry, and as you can see, it's not flat. The bowl helped to give it some shape. It was really rough, so I sanded it and tried to make it look smoother. I used some acrylic paint, painted it this creamy beige color. And when I was painting, I realized that the clay was super textured and there was a lot of cracking, so I thought I could kind of hide it with some speckles and paint. I just used some brown paint and put some on my brush. You don't want a ton of paint on your brush. And then just using my fingers, as you can see, I'm just splashing the paint, you could say, on my candle holder. Because I wanted to cover the textures, I decided to go heavy on the speckling. I just covered it all and then used some spray paint to give it a more of a shiny look. I don't know, I wanted it to look almost glossy. And here's the candle holder after drying. For some reason the color changed after the spray paint, but here it is. So I hope you enjoyed today's DIYs. If you did, please let me know down below which one was your favorite, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Hope to see you again. Bye!